Dr. De Castro, do you mind if I call you Rene?
Yeah, please do.
Welcome, sir, to...
Can I call you Klink?
Of course, absolutely. Welcome, sir, to Business and Politics, and thank you for making time. Sir, this is, I think, a privilege for us to talk to someone who briefs our security officials on the security situations that we face. And there are many issues that we'd like to talk to you about.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you gave me the opportunity to at least express my views to the wider public about how we have to consider developments that are happening abroad that will definitely have impact on us as a nation.
Sir, first,
Rene.
Rene, let me ask you first about your reading of the things that are going on. What's in the news are, of course, the EDCA sites that were revealed. I mean, at least the names were formally announced now. We have the Balikatan exercises, supposedly the biggest one of the series of those military drills. We had the resumption of the 2+2 meeting between Secretary Galvez and Secretary Manalo and their counterparts in the U.S. And of course, the other side of that is we have these tensions brewing in China with regard to its claim on Taiwan. There are many drills going on in the region. How do you see these things? Are these things to be worried about, or are these simply par for the course? What's the expert view?
Yeah, I'll say that it's a very challenging period. And this period is basically marked by an emergence of a great power who wants to basically pull its weight in the international community. Of course, I'm referring to China.
Okay.
Everyone has to remember what Napoleon Bonaparte said.
Yes.
At the onset of the 1800s, just before the Battle of Waterloo.
Let the sleeping dogs lie.
China is a sleeping dragon.
Yeah.
Don't stir it up, because once it awakens, it will shake the world. Now we are witnessing this at this point in time.
Okay. And how does that impact the global politics now? I mean, are we seeing, as some say, the beginning of a new Cold War, or is that an exaggerated reaction to what is going on?
Okay.
What do you see?
China would like to basically say, I am a power to reckon with.
Okay.
The current international society has been created without me.
Okay.
Or when China, of course, was suffering from what it calls a century of shame and humiliation.
Right.
And of course, during the time of Mao Zedong up to the 1980s, 1990s, China was not a power to reckon with.
Okay.
But of course, a lot of things changed in a matter of 2 decades. China became China has the second largest economy in the world. It created, of course, a sense of confidence that it's time for China to basically find its place in the sun.
Okay.
So that's basically what's happening. And of course, you have the reaction from a status quo superpower, the United States, that, I will not simply allow you to pull your weight around.
Okay.
You have to take into account that although I'm not part of the Indo-Pacific region, I am a resident power here, I have my interests here, I have my alliances here, and of course, I have a role as the strategic offshore balancer.
Okay.
I would have to basically ensure the freedom of navigation in the waters in the Western Pacific. So you have to take into account my presence. Unfortunately, of course, we are caught in the middle.
Okay. Do you think, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, Renato, that maybe there is an argument to be made for viewing China from the lens of the West? And that is, when a power rises, it becomes expansionary. And that there is not much credit given to China's history itself, where it became the Middle Kingdom, and yet its behavior was not to expand, but was to exclude the world. Everyone outside of China was essentially barbarians to to the Middle Kingdom. What do you think of that view?
For one thing, of course, if you have to look at Chinese history, China has always identified itself as an empire, based on the dynasty.
Yes.
And historically, when empires are strong, they expand.
Okay.
So you look at Chinese history, starting, of course, from the Qin, Han, Sung. If you have, of course, the imperial dynasty powerful, the tendency is to expand.
Okay.
So, we are at this point in time that China is strong, China is powerful, China still has this mentality that I'm the middle kingdom, I'm the middle power. Before the West came here, I maintained the tributary system, when China is, of course, the center of the region. So from the Chinese perspective, there's been an anomaly because the West came here. Now we have to go back to the normal. The normal is China is the middle kingdom. China, of course, is the power to reckon with.
Right.
This is how China views the world.
Okay. Let me press you a bit.
Sure.
So, some people would say that China was more concerned, just looking at history, China would say that it has never really expanded as you were describing it. Maybe some say consolidating, right? It's different kingdoms within China, but they didn't really go beyond that kingdom.
Okay.
And that the tributary thing. So there's another story behind it, and I guess after that episode of the Chinese naval expansion in history, that they really went back and really became insular and really wanted more to isolate themselves from the rest of the world.
Yeah, probably that was the time. But you have a number of interventions that happened, of course, in the 20th century.
Okay.
Number one, of course, you have the Chinese Revolution.
Okay.
From the Chinese perspective, it's a way for us to redeem ourselves from the century of shame and humiliation.
Okay.
Plus, of course, you have the Communist Party coming into power.
Okay.
In 1949, during the creation of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong made this speech.
Okay.
We would have to assert our power. We should never allow other powers to, of course, make China weak, or we would suffer again that century of humiliation. So this is the commitment of the Communist Party of China.
Yeah.
China should remain powerful, should remain as strong as ever. Then, of course, you have the dramatic reform initiated by Deng Xiaoping, the modernization program. Then, of course, going back to the 21st century, China achieved this goal. And, of course, China right now is ruled by a president, President Xi Jinping, who basically has this vision.
Unprecedented
power and the fact that, he has this ambition.
Yeah.
His ambition, of course, is to ensure that China would again ever experience any decline. Challenging, of course, the notion of, the history of empires. If empires are powerful, they would expand. If empires are weak, they would contract. So the goal of the Communist Party under President Xi Jinping is to prevent the cycle from ever happening again.
Yeah. I want to ask you about two comments I've heard from the American side. We were talking earlier about Professor Graham Allison of Harvard University came up with this concept about the Thucydides trap that basically said that, rising powers tend to threaten existing powers. But he, as we were discussing, he didn't say that was a conclusion. That there are many things that can happen to prevent war. What are your thoughts? Does it apply to what we're seeing now?
Yes, in a way, yes.
In the West Philippine Sea?
But also in the same book, he mentioned this. He was referring to a forest fire,
right?
Forest fire during summer.
Yeah.
So you already have the air becoming dry.
Okay.
You don't have any rain. You have a lot of dry leaves, a lot of dry trees. But that will not simply trigger a forest fire.
Okay.
You need a spark, a flame.
Okay.
So the condition is there, the necessary condition is there. You simply need that sufficient condition where somebody would have to throw, a flame that will trigger a forest fire.
Are we in that situation now where the conditions are ripe?
Yeah, the conditions are ripe, but it could still be managed if we are wise enough, or the two powers are wise enough to prevent that spark from being, of course, triggered.
Okay. Now, given that, what therefore is the Philippine interest? Are we committed to maybe this seemingly stopless train that's headed for conflict, or does our interest lie somewhere else? Some would say, and we've said this also in the Manila Times, that maybe our interest lies in keeping the peace.
Well,
what is your view?
That's our interest, to maintain the peace.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we are, of course, prisoners of geography.
Okay.
Or, of course, what Robert Kaplan would call, we have to, of course, witness the revenge of history.
Okay.
Our location
Okay.
Basically, right in
Puts us
the
in the
middle,
middle.
in the middle, no, of
Okay.
these two great powers.
Right.
China is in our backyard,
Yeah.
and of course, historically, the Philippines has been the base of U.S. exercise of playing that role of a Pacific power. Beginning, of course, when we became a territory of the United States,
Right.
1898.
So going back to Graham Allison, right? What would you think he would recommend to foreign policymakers here in the Philippines? Because he said that war was not a foregone conclusion,
Yes.
right? He said the conditions are right, but you can you can still do something about it. So what would be, if Graham Allison you think would be advising us? What would you think the correct foreign policy stand should be?
Well, one thing we have to be very careful. Of course, we have to take into account. Now, we're not just a neutral player here.
Okay.
We have a territorial dispute with China.
Okay.
China wants to deprive us of 85% of our exclusive economic zone.
Okay.
You have the Chinese People's Liberation Army's Navy, Coast Guard, and civilian militia operating in our waters.
Okay.
So we're confronted with that situation. And of course, we're also a treaty ally of the United States.
Okay.
So at this point in time, the only thing we could do is to prevent, any incident that might trigger this forest fire.
And do we have leverage? I mean, very quickly.
We have to be very careful. I still remember when I was working in the National Security Council under General Cesar Garcia, we have to give instructions to our Navy ships and our Coast Guard vessels. Make sure that you exercise extreme caution.
Maximum restraint.
Because, once we get involved in the conflict, we have a treaty ally who might just decide, although you're not invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty because, simply I have beef against China, then of course I will honor the treaty commitment.
Right.
Then of course China would also expect the worst.
Yeah.
The Philippines will automatically be assisted by the United States, so we have to make that action.
Yeah.
So we have to tread it carefully.
Yeah. Well,
of course, recognizing the fact that we are still a treaty ally of the United States. It's a policy of the current president to strengthen that alliance relations for one reason or the other.
yeah, very, very interesting. Right now, we'll just have to take a quick break. This is Business and Politics. We'll be right back.